They're beautiful.
Yes.
I almost have my braids.
Hi guys, welcome to How You Living. I'm Dr. Kiva, your chiropractor yoga teacher.
Hey everybody, I'm your favorite tea lady, Robin B. How you doing, Dr. Kiva?
I am good.
Great.
I am good.
It's good to see you.
It is.
It seems like I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks, so.
Since I got over my COVID.
Yeah, I wasn't going to be the one to spill the tea. Not on that one. But praise the Lord, you are all better.
Yeah, it was funny because I did my booster on Sunday.
Okay.
And then my friend was like, oh, my son has COVID. So then I tested positive on Tuesday.
After your booster?
After my booster.
That is not a good advertising for a booster.
Well, you know, the booster takes a week.
Okay, no, I did not know that.
My symptoms were I had a fever and some body aches.
But you didn't have it bad. You really didn't have it bad. She was still joking all the way through. You were sending me funny text messages.
I got to take naps.
See, she got, you know what?
It was a staycation.
That was your body allowing you to take it easy. Oh my goodness. Well, we needed you to hurry back because there's a lot of things to talk about.
Yeah, speaking of which.
Yes, so we would need to introduce a phenomenal woman. Last time she was here, I was sick. So thank God we're both healthy today.
That is so true.
Yes, and we're going to keep it that way.
Exactly.
We are going to introduce our special guest today is an attorney, an author, and a woman's advocate, and she is a phenomenal woman, and her name is Ms. Attorney Umi Grigsby. Yay! Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me again.
Thank you for coming back. Cause I tell you, because you weren't here when she
missed the first one.
and it was so awesome.
I heard she's been talking about you since. She said we've got to get that lady back.
I was like,
here.
let's get to her, especially with all the concerns with women's health and everything going on, and how we're not even over our own bodies.
Right. So the conversation definitely is going to circle, I think today, center around women, especially women of color, and our health and our choices that have been taken away.
So, Attorney Grigsby, tell us your story.
Right. Well, how did you become an advocate?
Oh, thank you. So I feel like I've always been an advocate just because my mother, my earliest memory and a story that she tells all the time was my father had been imprisoned as a political as a member of the political opposition in my native Liberia. And so she went to go visit him and to go feed him, and she was pregnant with me. And she said one of the soldiers came up to her and they were like, "Are you having a boy or a girl?" And she was like, "I don't know." And they asked if they were, basically threatened her, and they were like, "We're going to check right now." And at that point she had said, I'm so tired, because she had my older sister at home. She was taking care of my dad and pregnant, and she was just like, you know what, I'm just really tired, whatever you want to do. And he left her alone. And I just think about the fact that my mother isn't sort of like a natural advocate. She's not an attorney, but she is one of those people who will always stand up for herself, for her family, for her children, and I think a lot of times for women, because we're in this space where we have to hold our families together, data shows that when we make decisions for ourselves and our family and not just us. And so I think we're just natural advocates. Of course, that's stereotypical and it's, leaning into gender norms. But for me, I think I just come from a long line of strong women. My father is an advocate, and so I just always wanted to be an advocate.
That's a story.
That is a great story.
What do you think? I mean, why did he ask that question? Did you ever figure out why would someone ask that? What if it went one way or the other? What difference would it have made?
I think honestly, it was just he had the power
just harassing
in that
her.
moment. He was just harassing her. I think he had the gun. He had the power. She was coming to visit somebody, and I think in a lot of times it's just in a lot of these situations it's just the power dynamic.
Yes.
He didn't know my mother from anybody. My mother didn't know him. I think it was just I can exercise my power this way. And I think the reason I tell that story all the time is that because for her, she just showed no fear in that moment, because it was just like, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, like
she didn't give him the result he was looking for, which was cowering probably.
And
exactly.
It's so sad, because the story that comes to mind that's in the news now is that whole thing that the pastor said about women being like men, and
I
it's
didn't-
like
Yeah.
T.D. Jakes.
I didn't hear
He was
that.
saying
Yes.
that, you know, like women now are more masculine
Oh,
and they're
wow.
more men-like. But it's like
Yeah.
we have no
Right.
choice.
I mean, we really
have
have
no
been
choice.
thrust into that role.
Yeah.
I mean,
And we've all
yeah.
Sorry,
I mean,
go
a big
ahead.
part of it is the men in our families, how many of them have been forced one way or the other into the prison system, forcing us to
Exactly.
be male and female, you know? So,
Exactly.
And that reminds me of your mother because she had to have the courage to
Yes.
speak up.
Right.
And if we don't have a
Exactly.
voice when it comes to even our health, we have to have a voice.
we have to. We have no
Exactly.
choice. And
Exactly.
even, you know, we're definitely going to talk about Roe v. Wade. But one thing I'm curious, because I see you all over the place, what does a day in the life of Umi look like? I
Oh,
mean,
she's like that.
she's everywhere. She is. You
I-
are with every person on every walk of life. I'm like, this woman is everywhere. So it's a miracle we have you.
You know, I think it's so interesting because before the pandemic, I would tell people I'm an introverted extrovert. So I was like, you know, I just need to recharge, but I can be around people, but I do need my alone time. And I think during the pandemic, I was like, nope, I'm an extrovert. I need to be around people. I need to, you know,
That's
and
one way
so
of finding out.
you know, so part of like what I do outside of my job, which is at the Chicago Foundation for Women, um, requires a lot of external facing work as well. And so not only that, but I'm also a commissioner on the Human Rights Commission. And so that's pretty external facing.
Yeah,
And so
I didn't know that.
I realized that I gravitate towards those roles because um, for me, it's always yes, I'm an advocate, but I, you know, trained as a movement lawyer. And when you're a movement lawyer, it's not about you leading. It's really about you giving people the tools and the information
Yes.
so that they can lead you, you know? And so you say to somebody, this is all the information I have. This is based on my skill, based on my experience. And then that person makes a decision for themselves.
Wow.
I think where we get into trouble is when we start to, whether it's healthcare, whether it's politics, whether it's anything, is when we start to just elevate that person just because they happen to have more knowledge.
Thank you.
And so I think for me being out there, I'm just asking people, I'm just a natural born learner and I'm just learning from everybody about what is important to them, what do they want change, and then how can I be the best advocate?
That's excellent. So, with that being said, we're really curious about how Roe v. Wade changed your daily life because I thought of you almost immediately
Yeah.
because I know it affects you. Your personal story is real important as well. And a lot of people may not know it. I don't know if we have time.
Yeah, because well, even if we look
I'm
at
happy to-
Roe versus Wade, you know,
Uh-huh.
when we look at that, and before we had talked about how women didn't have control over property,
Yes.
didn't have control
Right.
over anything, and it's like the husband had to make all the decisions for whatever was going on with the woman's body.
Exactly.
And now we're to a point like, okay, we're still there where women can't make decisions about what's going on with their own bodies.
Right.
You know?
And even
So-
if we talk about Black women specifically in this
Specifically.
country,
Yes.
we had no control over our bodies. Not even our husbands, not even our partners had control over our
Right.
bodies.
That's
you know?
right.
I'm African, but you know, part of my ancestry is Americo-Liberian. It's America from here, freed slaves from here. And so when I think about Roe v. Wade and I think about my personal story of, you know, having fibroids and being, you know, ignored, and then, you know, fibroids ultimately have an impact on your fertility,
Right.
which unfortunately is something that, you know, I'm experiencing right now and having to make those choices.
Right.
And so, you know, with Black women, we're seeing more and more that because we're more likely to have fibroids, we're more likely to have fibroids that are more intense.
Yes.
People are finally talking about that link between the fertility and fibroids. And so when you're bringing that into, we already have a problem with, you know, a disparity in access to health for Black women. And it doesn't matter about socioeconomic status. It doesn't matter about insurance. It's just, you know, we tend to have this lack of access. And now you bring in Roe v. Wade, you know, most of the states where abortion is likely to be made illegal, more Black women live in states that will likely ban abortion.
Really?
So if you know, I did a little bit of research. This is
Wow.
in the book. In the book, when I talk about Roe v. Wade, I talk more about how, you know, Black women were seen as midwives. That was, really the role that they played, and how white doctors basically said, we're going to disenfranchise them, we're going to take this away from them. It's too important for you to trust it to a woman, much less a Black woman.
Wow.
You have to trust it to us white men, right?
Yeah.
But now I think about the fact that Black people make up 38% of Mississippi's population. And Black women in the United States are nearly 4 times more likely to have abortions than white women.
That was one
Latina
of the
women
questions
are
we had.
twice as likely.
So
And
the
this is from
story.
2019.
Wait, before
Okay,
we go
we-
further, we're going to take a little short
Okay.
break because
sorry.
one question. Oh no, one question I also want to find out is why should we care? You know, when it comes to someone who is beyond,
Right, that
childbearing
we're not in
years.
childbearing
Yes.
years
So
anymore.
what is how does
Absolutely.
that relate to why should we care?
Right, how's it affect us?
Yeah,
That's
exactly,
a very good
exactly.
question.
So we're going to
Exactly.
take a little short break, and we're going to pick your brain and see what
Yes.
you're going to come up with. I can't wait.
I know it's going to be.
It's gonna be good.
It's going to be good. No question. So we'll be right back. Couple of minutes. We'll
Exactly.
be right back.
Yeah.
Hey guys,
Should I
Ashley here
wait
with
until we
Endure
come
Tea
back
Company.
to Talker?
And are you feeling sluggish? Well, we got something for you. Endure's all-new Slim Tea 14-day detox. This organic detox tea helps to purify your body by gently removing toxins, waste,
Exactly.
and excess water. The premium herbs were blended to support your immune system, help boost your metabolism,
Yeah.
and stimulate your sluggish digestive system
To
to help you feel
understand why.
lighter and less bloated. And let's be honest here. Who does not like being lighter and less bloated? I mean, if you ask me, I definitely do. This delicious blend has powerful ingredients that help support a healthy colon. Plus, it's caffeine free, y'all.
Exactly.
So visit us today at youndure.com. And remember, when you make healthy choices, you endure.
I wish I was
And
in
we
Texas.
are back. And we're talking to attorney, women's advocate. What else can
And
we call
author,
her?
and we need to talk about your book as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Miss
that's
Umi, there she goes.
there
She got
it
her
is.
book.
Very good.
Yeah, that's
Umi
pretty good.
Grigsby. And tell us the name of your book.
It's Empowered Health,
That's
reforming a dismissive healthcare system.
Beautiful. I hope
Nice.
it's a bestseller. It should be.
So,
Definitely.
so we were talking about the decision on abortion, and I just wanted to know why should, even as a man or a woman who is past having children, why should we care so much about the decision?
Well, for 3 reasons. One, I will say I have a niece. She's 3 years old. And I can't imagine the fact that now, with almost half the country banning abortion, we've just made the country smaller for her. So we've literally made the country smaller for people who are coming up, future generations. The second one is access to healthcare. So in a lot of rural areas, for a lot of poor Black women, this is low quality healthcare that they no longer have access to, because a lot of those Planned Parenthoods and clinics, even though they provided abortion, they also provided your women's
And breast
annual exam.
exams, yes.
They provided all of these different services that women actually need for their own health. So that's another thing, that you're cutting off access to healthcare for people. And the third thing is, if you looked, they said that in Texas, where you are, when they brought back the first decision, limiting abortion, that the searches for vasectomies went up. And so you start
Interesting.
thinking about men who are partners with people who can have babies, right?
Right.
It impacts not only that woman's earning power, her career, the decisions she can make about her own body, but it also impacts the decision that you can make as a family. Can she work? Can she not work? How many kids she can have? Whether or not, in some places they're going after ectopic pregnancies, which is a pregnancy that is not even viable, that
It's
will never be
right,
viable.
and unsustainable, and it will
That's
kill
wild.
you.
It's unsustainable.
Yes.
It's unsustainable. And so when you go, or even if you look in Ohio, I think, where there was a 10-year-old that was a victim,
Of rape.
of incest. And so it's a 10-year-old. And so you're putting all of these people, all of these women, all of these people who can have children in danger. And for what? What is on the other end? Because
Right.
you start thinking about the fact that a lot of people are like, well, we'll put more money into family planning. Well, what stopped you for all the years before in putting all that money into family planning? And how long will it take for you to bolster up family planning, maternal care, and let's not even talk about sexual health education and whether or not people even understand,
Right.
all the things that can happen
Clearly
when you
they
get
don't.
pregnant.
When
I
you
know
think,
people who
right.
were forced to have abortions because they had a miscarriage. And so you had to give birth to this baby that
Right.
was not going to survive.
Right.
And so now what are you going to say about that baby who is, you know,
So, are you
Yeah, that's a bit
familiar
much.
with what Biden's trying to do? He's trying to sign a bill that will mitigate that to some extent.
hmm
What do you think? Too
Well, so
little, too
here's the
late?
problem. It's the issue with executive orders is if you go back to
Yeah.
DACA
They
or
can
you
be
go back
canceled.
to,
Yeah.
even Obamacare and all
Right.
of these things, when it's the executive order, it's tied to the president.
Right. It's temporary. It's a
It's
temporary
temporary.
fix. But
Exactly.
it's
And
Everything
better.
so
is temporary.
Everything's temporary.
everything is temporary.
And we
Right.
didn't
We've
think Roe
realized
versus Wade wasn't
Oh my
temporary.
God. We did not know
It
that.
became
exactly.
That's a
temporary.
very good point.
Exactly. And as an attorney, I think that's really scary because people start
Right.
to rely on things. So people
Yes.
relied on things for since 1973.
Right.
And so it's
Right.
50 years of relying on something that you think you have and then it's taken away. And you can't really govern that way, right?
Right. No,
Because
you
you're
can't.
just thinking the entire time you're just thinking, "Oh, if this person's in power, then I have rights. If this person's
Right.
not in power, then I
Right.
don't have
You
rights."
can't operate
And
like that.
you can't
And
operate like that.
Until we get a court case where
Oh,
a pregnant woman's going to take the baby daddy for early child support.
thank you. And you need
You
Exactly.
something
know
like
that's going to
that.
happen.
You
And
need something like
and
that.
we'll get a whole bunch of male allies
Yeah,
at that
a
point.
whole bunch right now. Or if you really, the what, 6 Supreme Court justices who made that happen, something drastic needs to happen to them personally. But I don't know if that would do, because if you think of the senator who was shot up, he's still all for gun rights.
He's still
He
all
came
for
back. He's half. He's got missing parts, but he's still all about gun rights. So
and that's
So
the thing.
Attorney Bixby, are you saying that it's more black women? You said we have more abortions than any others?
In Mississippi, black women accounted for 74% of
oh
abortions in
my
2019
goodness.
in
Now,
Mississippi.
In
and
Mississippi.
what's
In
heartbreaking is, as
Mississippi.
we speak right now, someone's being raped, someone's being
Yes.
abused by their family member, and they're going to end up pregnant. And so, in 9 months from what just happened, we don't know what kind of hell is going to let loose on our poor
We
families all
don't.
around this
We
country.
don't.
And that's why, to me, it ties into what T.D. Jakes was saying, because
Right.
it's another man who's
Right.
trying to give
Thank you.
ownership of what a woman is supposed to do
Right.
with her
That's
body and
remarkable.
her mental.
That's right. And then you can't even, it's not even about socioeconomic all the time, because Serena Williams went through that.
Yes.
And who was
Yes.
the other? Somebody else went through that, another famous person. I can't remember who.
What, through this childbirth?
Yeah, that
Because
they
now-
didn't listen to their pain.
But now here's the flip
Yes.
side. So when we talk about childbirth, there's a lot of documentaries now that
The
show how
mortality.
black women die.
Right, the mortality.
One
I
in
know
4.
personally.
1 in 4.
Right,
Or,
2.
sorry, they're 3 to 4 times more likely than white women
That's
to
outrageous.
die.
And so
That's
are they doing anything do we know why?
And so
Lack of
some of it is tied to this like lack of competency in care. Some of this is tied to not believing black women or black people in general when they say they're in pain. A lot of times we're seen as drug seeking. One
Yes.
famous, example that you brought up is Serena Williams saying, "I know what this feels like. I know something's wrong." And this is Serena Williams having to say,
Right.
like, I
Right.
demand that you check, right?
Absolutely.
There's another case of a woman named Kira Johnson who complained that, think something was wrong, that she was feeling weak, and they didn't get to her for 10 hours. And when they got to her, they realized that when they had, during childbirth, they had nicked, I think, something where she was basically bleeding internally for 10 hours,
God.
and they couldn't save her. And this is someone, her husband was there, she had a child before, and so when you think about, they have things that where women will say I'm in pain, black women will say I'm in pain, and there's an assumption that they're just looking for drugs.
Yeah.
There are medical students that think that black people have a higher tolerance for pain, which is not based in science.
Right.
And so I think all of these things sort of, snowball.
Yeah.
These are all some of the reasons that we're not that we're not taking people seriously, you know? Even in California, that has the lowest maternal mortality rate in the country, they still have this disparity where Black women are still 3 to 4 times more likely to die. And then when you start to ask people about, you know, reasons why, sometimes you'll hear that the fault lies back on the woman. Well, what is she
Oh my
eating?
God.
What is her diet? Is she taking care of herself? Is she exercising?
And in the
Is
case
it
of
high blood
Kara,
pressure?
she was very
And it's
healthy, right? She was
exactly.
very
And so you
healthy.
think
And they were
about
like semi-affluent, right? So it doesn't
exactly.
matter.
Well, you know, I
It
mean, it's
doesn't
interesting,
matter.
even going back to the idea of fibroids and infertility, you know, to find out why Black women have
Yep.
them more. So if you go talk to a doctor, oh, it's
Yeah.
just more commonly seen. Okay, but
But
why?
why?
Here's
And
what
they don't
Exactly.
get to the
because they
whys.
don't know. And my thing is always they are practicing. And I
Yeah.
choose for them not to practice on me, to be honest.
Yes.
But
But
what,
even with that though, they've been practicing long enough where maybe they would find out,
well,
because we all eat differently. We
there,
all, you know what I'm saying? So, but I'm just saying
Yes.
when we come to
right,
look at fibroids,
right.
that might
But
have something to do with the childbirth. It might be tied together, and if they're not studying that,
right.
then we don't know really what's going on.
And they won't study it as long as
Stress
it's
or
right.
trauma, you
Right.
know?
Well, there was a
Generational.
holistic doctor, right, who she tied it to the Eurocentric diet. You know, our bodies are made to eat like Afrocentric, and so I know you're looking at me like what? But when she cut out chicken, her name is Dr. Pookrum. Look her up, Jewel Pookrum. She got rid of cheese, dairy, and chicken. Her fibroids went away, and she had other things that were reversed when she stopped eating like Americans and she started eating
Yeah.
like Africans. And there's
Yeah.
something to that. I think there's something to it.
Wait, I don't know if it's, but I
I
think
mean, how
it's just
come we have
poor.
so much diabetes? How come we have so much high cholesterol and high blood pressure? And we're eating the same thing that John Smith is eating.
It falls back to what she was just saying. It is, some of it is diet.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
it's
saying? So
absolutely.
it could
But I
be,
think
but
I think I right. It's like why aren't you doing more of the research to find out the why?
Yes, yes.
Because and I don't have the site for it, but there have been studies where when Black women are in Africa,
Uh-huh.
the rates of fibroids are low. But when they move here to the US, their rates after a certain amount of time start to mirror Black American women.
Ergo,
So it
what I just
might
said.
be
Right,
exactly. It might be that.
exactly.
It might be the trauma.
Right.
It might
I
be the
wouldn't mind
stress.
going to
it
live
might
in
be
Africa
it might
for a
be
year.
the environment or
It could
just
be
the air we breathe.
right. It could
But it's
be
still just very interesting that that's
yes.
always the fallback.
Yeah,
You
it
know.
could be the
Exactly.
toxic life of America,
Exactly.
really.
So are they in medical school? Are they trying to change the curriculum to realize that let's look at the human and not
Yeah,
just look at the
that's
race?
great.
So I think I think one of the things that happened in the pandemic, right? During the pandemic, when there was the murder of George Floyd, there was also, I talk a little bit about a woman in Brooklyn who also died in childbirth. And the community rallied around the actual hospital, asked for answers, right?
Good, great.
And I think as people started to talk about the resistance within Black communities to vaccines, which I think you can talk about Tuskegee, you can say, well, that's outdated. You can say, but when you start talking about generational trauma
Yes.
and how people pass down that kind of information, I think people started to think about the need for trust within these communities that have been marginalized for years and years and years. And so I do think a lot of sort of, I call them big box hospitals, but like the private hospitals are thinking about ways that they can do more community engagement, where they can do more, equity training and DEI training. But the training isn't enough unless it's tied to something else.
Right.
Because in California, they did all the training, at the same time, the implicit bias training. But then we all have been in those trainings where we just at the end check it and say like,
Right.
thank you very much, and then move on. How do you know that people are actually changing their behavior?
Right.
So that's why I actually have been writing and talking a lot about FQHC, so they're federal qualified health centers. And those get money from the government, and part of the requirement is that they have to have members from the community on their board. And I think
Very
what ends up
good.
happening is that there's that community accountability. So if
Representation,
you
yeah.
start, right, if you start to have those disparities, then someone's asking a question like, why is it unsafe for me to be here?
Right.
And
Because
what is happening?
how long we've had middle-aged to old white men making all the decisions for us, you know?
Exactly.
So, and that's
Exactly.
basically what's going on right now.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I heard, and is race still used as an algorithm for patients when looking at
I
it? Do you know if
I
that's
wasn't able to find a lot of that
okay?
information. I think people have
Okay.
just started to
Okay.
But I think
track
it
things like
probably
that.
would be because when someone coming into the ER,
Mm-hmm.
because of course you're going to ask age, you're going to
Right.
ask
I
race,
always feel
and
ambivalent about
so
answering that, to be honest.
so when you
Like,
do
will I
that,
get less treatment if I
it's
say
not a.
African American?
It's more so you look at like, maybe,
You know what I'm saying?
and
Right.
it'll be more so like what's more common,
Mm-hmm.
because the reality of it is a lot of people that I see, they have diabetes,
Uh-huh.
and you start to get into this mindset, oh, you're
Right.
black, do you have
Yeah,
diabetes?
yeah. You
Instead of
start
kind of
asking.
talking to the person
Right.
because you see it so
They're
often.
a statistic
It
almost.
is.
Right.
But I think one of the things that's helpful is the patient satisfaction surveys.
Oh,
Because when you
yeah.
start
That
to
really
go through
works. Huh?
those, you start to realize one, that Black patients are more likely to say that they didn't feel like they were listened to. They felt like
Yes.
they were dismissed. They felt, or a lot of times, Black women will say, I know that there's better care out there. I just don't think I'm getting it.
Oh, that's
And when
very
you
good.
start to see, when you start to see that over around the country and you
Mm-hmm.
start to see that over and over again, I think it's good because I think more people will start to say, well, what is it that we're doing
Right.
that a Black person
Right.
walks in here and they feel immediately that you don't care, or they're being dismissed, or they're not being treated like everybody else.
You know what I think it's a mixture of too?
Mm-hmm.
Like you were saying earlier, sometimes mentally we feel as though this is the expert and we don't ask the questions, or we're intimidated to ask the questions, or we don't want to, for them to assume that we don't understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
Instead of
All of
going,
the above.
instead of saying, explain that to me
Yeah.
again, to actually be an advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
I think that we
Yeah.
get into this space where
100%.
we don't speak up for ourselves
Right. Because
also.
we assume
Yeah, it's
that
true.
they know what they're doing.
Yeah,
And that is
or it's fearful, because if you say you're not educated,
Right.
and then you're coming into this doctor and you're like, okay.
let me tell you something.
Instead, I'm like,
Yeah.
That will never be Robin.
Yeah.
I give them
I
so much a run for their money,
But when we're looking at as far as
and you
like,
should.
Yeah.
we're looking at a lot of the low income.
Oh, absolutely.
And those Planned Parenthood facilities, maybe they don't feel comfortable
Right.
speaking to a doctor.
And I was going to ask you that. So, with the overturn of Roe v. Wade, does that mean Planned Parenthood went away for even health support?
So, and
can you still get
a lot of
exams?
those, well, a lot of those clinics are closing. A
Oh
lot
my
of those
God.
centers are having to close. There were, on the day that it happened, there were places that had appointments coming in that had to cancel those appointments like that day,
Like
right?
even if they were getting a breast exam or just a Pap test, or
I think that the centers are still there, but I
okay,
think that it's still one of those things where there was a recalibration that had to happen,
okay,
right?
right,
Where the issue is like we're still going to be providing these other services,
hmm
but all the other services that people were waiting for
right.
had to, they had to recalibrate what
Yikes,
they were doing.
man.
I mean, they can continue doing that, but I mean, it's not just the intimidation as
hmm
well that people
hmm
are facing.
Right.
That a lot of times, not just the Planned Parenthood, but a lot of the smaller clinics and centers, some
hmm
of them probably just feel like, you know, it's not, they can't sustain
Right.
being open.
Absolutely.
The funding in a lot of those
Yeah,
places
they've lost
probably had to
funding.
dry up,
For sure.
or there's probably like some sort of shift in that funding because at the end of the day, those organizations also have to see whether or not they're now breaking the law by funding those
Right.
organizations, right?
So what's
In a
the
place like
solution?
Texas, it was
Right.
basically
Texas
a
is a nightmare.
manhunt now for anybody that you suspected was having an abortion and like, you know what I mean?
It's mind
And
blowing. It really is mind
exactly.
Well,
blowing.
honestly, is it?
Oh
Is it? I mean, if
yeah.
you think about it,
I feel like we're watching
if we
something.
really go back history,
It's
Yeah.
like Armageddon.
if we look
we're-
at history, how if we talk about holding the syphilis vaccine for people
Right,
who had syphilis,
right,
or
right.
if we talk about how they did hysterectomy on black women
Yes.
without, like
Without-
experimentation.
yeah. Don't, please.
So if we're talking about all of
Yeah.
these things that have always been going on to history,
Right.
and then we move and shift and realize that we still feel uncomfortable with the medical community because of that history,
Absolutely.
can
Yes.
we really be shocked at what's going
Well,
on?
the reason we're
Exactly.
shocked now
You
is
know?
because it's more universal. Now it
it's
transcends
just-
race. And
Yes.
so now, unless the
But
white
it's still
patients are
female.
getting, they're
Yeah.
getting, yeah, it's still female.
You know what I'm saying?
And
So
that's-
it's not male, so
that's
it's like-
not going to change. I think that the sin of America is very male centric. Okay, that's our sin. So if this country was run by women, we'd be so much better off. But you're supposed to stop me from getting on my soapbox. But so what?
I mean, I'm not going to stop you.
She's not. She's just laughing at
I
you.
said, kick me if I get on my soapbox, please. But so what's the solution? What is being done other than this executive order that's temporary?
I know. What can we do?
Yeah, what can we do?
I think for me, me speaking for me, I think there are a whole host of things. Organizations like Planned Parenthood, obviously, and the ACLU, they have, toolkits that people can use. There are also local abortion funds, that need that funding, the smaller organizations. But one of the things that we've been doing, where I work at the foundation where I work, is looking into building a movement that's about reproductive justice, because the pillars of reproductive justice are about, two of them are about, the choice of when to have or to not have children, and then also to make sure those children are being raised in the most optimal environments or circumstances. And so when you start thinking about that and you start centering the idea of like reproductive justice, then it's not just reactionary in terms of like, how do you have more access? It really is about like, how do you holistically think about, about building a movement so that it's not just, because when you talk to Black women who have been doing this work, they have been saying for years and years, Roe is going to fall.
Yep.
And not only is Roe going to fall, but a lot of us don't have as much choice and access to these centers. A lot of people had transportation barriers and other barriers to access choice in the first place. So that's one thing. I think another thing is we should really try and put as much pressure as we can on, we should really advocate as much as possible for sharing our stories. I really love that question of why should we care? And I think that's one of the things that is impacting all of us. It's like this idea of like, well, if it's not happening to me, or if I can take care of my family, or if I can take care of my friends, there will never be enough. And I say this as an immigrant, there will never be enough money or enough resources for you to take care of you and all of your people if you're not advocating for systemic change.
That's right.
But ultimately, I just say, like, make sure you're giving to those organizations that are closest to the grassroots and are closest to the people who are the most, immediately and negatively impacted, because I do believe that when you lift people up, all of us benefit. And I also think, to a certain extent, losing hope benefits the other side. It felt a lot of, it felt like
that gives them more strength and more power. You're right.
Exactly. Like, I felt like I was being trolled, like when the leak happened, and then when this, like, it just felt like, and then there was this viral video of, I think it was someone in New York, and I don't want to say if it was a fireman or a police officer, because I don't want to slander anybody, but there's a viral video of a man in New York yelling at protesters and saying, "I own you now."
Oh my
like women
gosh.
protesters, and saying, "I own you now." Like,
And that's true. I mean, to a certain
you
extent.
have no choice, right?
So-
Something to that effect. And I was like, it is a little bit about demoralizing us. And so now that people are talking about, like, well, now we need a federal ban. Now we need. So I do think that we need to work on codifying.
Here's what I would do.
I tell you where it started.
Where?
Because we had a
Don't say
president that wanted to
that
grab
brought-
a woman.
Well,
and
yep,
so now
and
they,
so now
they
he-
really grabbing us.
Yep, he literally, figuratively, now he's got his hand
They
on
really
all
did
of
grab
them.
it.
Absolutely.
All of us.
And that is,
On all
you're
of us.
100% right.
I think he would like that one.
You're 1,000% right. He has left such an indelible, horrible legacy It is unbelievable.
And then the flip side of that is voting.
He's so much garbage.
Yeah.
I
Because
can't
it was
even.
because of maybe men not voting.
Right. Well,
You know,
here's
and
the,
then,
here's
now
the,
we have a
here's-
Supreme Court that was
here's the
able to
kicker,
do that.
Okay. The rub is
Yep.
all the women who are now on the receiving end are the ones who voted him in the first place. Okay, he got voted in by them, so they got to live with it, but we have to live with it too.
Now,
if I
We
had
have
a
to
young
live with it,
girl,
too.
I would immediately put her on birth control
Do they
because
still have-
she's not
Yes.
going to be having a rapist baby.
But do they still have
you
Plan
know?
B? Is that going away too? The Plan B pill?
So the next thing is a lot of states are going after access to
That's
birth
amazing.
control.
They're
So
trying
people
to
are going
force.
after access. They're trying to,
They're trying
going
to
after
force you to
access
have
to birth
babies.
control, making people who have embryos,
That's amazing.
carry those embryos or classifying them as like,
Babies, humans.
babies.
Right. Wait,
I
did
think
you hear?
yeah.
Did you
Go
hear
ahead,
about
sorry.
that
We
you're
should go do
allowed to
one more.
murder a woman if she's heading for an abortion without thinking? If you murder her, you're murdering the baby too, you dumbass. That is
Exactly. How is
there's
that?
a law.
Exactly.
What state is that?
Exactly.
You probably know.
I don't. I know that
Is
there's
it like
a whole-
Mississippi? It's somewhere. It's somewhere where
But I
they
mean,
don't
is
have
that-
any- they don't have any book
But-
learning.
It wasn't Mississippi. I think Missouri.
That's not
actually.
nice.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Missouri is looking at the the apps
Maybe
that some
it's
of us
Missouri.
use to see like when we're fertile, when we're not fertile, like those apps to just like track. They're now getting access. There was someone in Missouri that had all of that on a spreadsheet. It was
They're
looking to see
obsessed.
whether or not like that person was,
Wow.
looking at getting. And so I'm like, how invasive is that?
It's
And
beyond
so that's when
invasive.
exactly, and that's
filthy.
when you start asking that question of like,
It's hideous.
where does this end, and what are
Yeah.
you trying to do?
I don't think it does end. I don't think, as long as the trajectory we're on right now is everyone's going to fall off the edge of the earth anytime. I always say, if I didn't have so many family members here, I would definitely move. Liberia. I would love to live in Liberia. You're crazy.
But even more so, it's like when they start to go after this, what's next?
That's what she was
What-
saying.
you know,
and
You're
it's-
you're
and so it's
absolutely
like,
right.
as far as, I think they're looking maybe even for gay marriages, and
Yeah.
they're gonna
That's
go down.
on the chopping
It becomes
block.
a very slippery slope.
It's a very
when you-
slippery
when you
slope.
when you don't get involved.
Right.
Exactly,
Right.
and that was the thing that was really, the whole leak was scary. The first
that
draft
leak
very
was,
scary.
it felt like
And-
a trolling. Yeah.
Right, and one of the things that was scary about it is there was this whole passage about rights that were not rooted in history.
Yikes.
And those included gay marriage, it included interracial marriage, it
Yeah,
included
interracial marriage.
that the state can't, sterilize women that they deem, not
Crazy. Right. No, it's not crazy.
Exactly,
but-
right?
Not
And so
mentally
all-
stable.
not
Right.
exactly. So all of these different rights were not rooted in history because they didn't exist in,
Right.
the
That's
1800s
phenomenal.
or whatever, or like, and I think about the fact that, well, like, who wrote the Constitution?
Right. They're
And
cherry
who was
picking
at that
this.
table?
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
You're happy.
Ex-
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
We're
And so I
it's a
do think
mess.
it's scary, but I
Mhm.
also think that we
Right.
have been voting the way, in our best, in the interest of protecting rights for
Correct.
a long
Correct.
time. 91% of Black women voted in the last election for, the current president. And then before that, I think it was 93% of Black women. So I feel like, when people
We're
start
doing
saying
our
things
part.
like, right? When people start
Yeah.
saying things like, well, why don't you, and what should we? And I'm like, I don't really, hold on.
Well, and I
hold,
get
and don't
offended.
don't hold your vote.
Right. I get offended, though, when they say, well, vote. Right now, all of you are in the majority, all three
Yeah.
branches. So voting, it didn't get us much, So that's really weird for them. This is what your president's saying right now. Well, vote. We vote. Why do you think you're standing in there right now? And he's got all the houses right now. So, but tell us
But
again the
just
name of
don't
your
hold your
foundation.
vote. Because
It's
some
difficult,
people
yeah.
want to hold the vote.
Yeah, you don't want to hold
We
your
got to
vote.
just keep going. And
gotta
Right.
keep
we've been
going.
doing it for years.
And we really
so,
need to advocate for finding a more viable leader. I mean, really, someone who really makes sense.
I mean, I think, obviously I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody.
Understood, attorney.
But, I think it's important to continue voting. I think that, it goes back to what I said. It's demoralizing, right? Especially when you're like, they're making it harder and harder for some people to vote.
Right.
And most of those people look like me and you.
Yes.
So,
yes.
and yet with that, we still show up. We still, go to the
That's my
ballot box.
point.
We still do it. And we've been doing
That's
it
my
for years
point.
and years.
Yeah,
And at a certain point,
lots of things have been signed in, but the Voters' Right Act has not been signed in. We're the ones who got them in there. Why are we still fighting for voters' rights?
But we don't want to overstep time because we know that the attorney has to leave.
555. That's a good sign.
555.
Oh, I love it.
So how can someone get in contact with you, especially if they want to get involved with some of your organizations that you work with?
We all need to be involved.
Well, so I'm not speaking on behalf of any of them.
Okay.
I'm
fair enough. Fair enough.
I work at a foundation for women. I am on the board of Planned Parenthood of Illinois. I am a commissioner for, Cook County. So personally, if you want to get in touch with me, I'm at, like my book, Empowered.
Yes.
So empowered.
Hold it real close.
Hold it real close. So can we join you on Instagram? Is that what your link on Instagram?
Mm-hmm. So on Instagram, I'm
and even if they search your name, they'll find you. Right on Instagram. Okay.
Umi Grigsby. I'm at Empowered Health also on Instagram, and I'm at empoweredhealth@gmail.com as well.
Wonderful.
So before we leave, do you have anything else coming down the pipeline since you seem to be so busy?
A busy woman.
And she does.
Please,
but she was about to tell. Well, I'm about to. So what's coming?
Yes, please.
So there are two things I'm working on. One is I am working on fiction because I do need a break from all of this. But it is, fiction. I do believe it's important to be a storyteller, and I do believe we have to center our stories, right? And so that people do understand why this impacts all of us and why we all have to be a part of. You can't just come to us every 4 years. You have to come to us throughout.
Thank you.
We are experiencing this, and I agree with you.
Thank you.
So I'm doing that, but I'm also going to be writing a little bit about, the fertility piece and having people, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is, we're imposing all of these, getting rid of Roe v. Wade, going after choice, going after birth control, going after all these things. But biologically, as, people who can have babies, there are a lot of other barriers that are beyond our control. There's the fibroids that nobody knows where it comes from. There's endometriosis. There's, fertility. There's the fact that, after 36, you stop producing as many eggs or as many viable eggs. There are all these things that women or that, people who have like these parts have to face internally anyway. And I think that we don't learn about them. And so I think when we start talking about choice, one of the reasons I think is important to think holistically about choice and health is because there are so many things that the lack of knowledge just denies us the ability to truly have control over our bodies. And so it's like we're fighting two fronts. We're fighting ignorance. We're fighting a lack of education, but then we're also fighting these external forces, because this is honestly state violence. Like if you think about those numbers of the maternal health rates and about the Black women that are going to be denied this choice, this is really violence against women. This is state-sponsored
It's
violence.
A war.
It is a war.
It's warfare.
It's a war. It feels like
really
warfare.
Is.
And so I think it is important to continue telling those stories. And, as uncomfortable as it may be sometimes, when you are comfortable, I think it's important to tell as many stories as possible so people know, all phases of what's going on.
Yeah, she is so awesome.
You are. I'm like, we need you.
We're gonna keep her.
She's so incredibly knowledgeable.
Like anytime,
we need you to be part of the panel. Absolutely. But I think you've
definitely
also
coming to the picnic.
She's inspired. Yeah, you're invited to all the picnics. But you're inspiring us to be involved. Absolutely.
Yes.
We
So
definitely.
you answered my question.
Yeah,
so I'm gonna be involved.
Phenomenal questions.
I'm gonna start rocking and rolling.
You by doing this, right? This is you sharing.
We're doing our part. We're doing the best we can by bringing high quality and interesting people like yourself to try to enlighten the community.
Exactly.
That's our job.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much, Umi. And we made it. We made it by 32 seconds. We appreciate you. Thank you.
And I had
And
so
I
much
promise
fun.
the
I
next
always
time we will be asking you back again.
Oh, for
There's
sure.
so much more to
Anytime.
cover.
We
Definitely
didn't-
want to
we
talk
didn't
about
even-
your book some more.
We didn't even really
We didn't scratch the
tap.
surface,
Yeah.
no.
So you got to come
There's
back.
so much.
I will.
We appreciate you. Thank you so much, and stay safe up there, and keep the fight going. All right.
Yes, you too.
All right,
I know
thank you.
you're at the battle line in
We
Texas.
appreciate. We're going to keep it going down
Yeah,
here.
we'll keep it
We'll
going.
do the best we can in Texas.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, whoa.
Well, we did it.
We did
We
it.
had it was a lot to, digest. We still got a long way to go.
Oh, yes. But she was a good one.
She was fantastic. The knowledge, and this is what we need. And this
Yeah.
is where we really need to get this information out.
Your brother's keeper. So it's really up to us to help
It is.
those that don't have a voice.
Yeah, and so I think a big part, there's a lot of room for us to do things for these young girls. Young
Yeah.
girls who are most likely going to be victimized at some point in their life, because 1 in 4 women are sexually abused, whether it's a girl or a woman. So there is room for us to do something.
Exactly. Well, guys,
We're out of here, but in the meantime, I think I'm spent. So in the meantime, we're going to ask you guys, how you living? Peace.